the heart and soul behind every business. Stories. Welcome to Business Story of the Week, hosted by me, Joshua Laurie. From setbacks to comebacks, from tragedies to triumphs, we inspire entrepreneurs through conversations that matter. Witness the magic that turns dreams into reality. Whether it's your career, business, or life, your success is always one story away. This is Business Story of the Week. And welcome back, folks. Welcome back to Business Story of the Week. I am your host, Joshua, and today's question is: could the secret to overcoming infertility be just one click away? It's quite, I think it's quite the profound question, especially with the times that we're going through right now as well. But our guest is the perfect guest to answer that question. Gabriela Rosa is a renowned fertility specialist, reproductive health educator, and Harvard University awarded scholar. She is the founder and CEO of the Rosa Institute, the world's first virtual and holistic fertility clinic serving patients globally. Gabriela's innovative methodology addresses biochemical obstacles to help couples overcome infertility and recurrent miscarriages. With her team, she has educated over 140,000 couples in more than 110 countries. She also hosts a Talk Sex with Gabriela Rosa podcast, and today she joins us for this podcast episode. And I'm quite excited to talk about what she does in all her stories. Gabriela, you are looking lovely today. Thank you for being on the show. How are you doing?
Thank you, Joshua. Thank you for having me. It's a
Fantastic.
pleasure.
It's again, it's interesting what you do first and foremost. We really need to get into that. But before we do, you know, what sparked this? We need to go back to the beginning. We need to know the origin story of Gabriela Rosa. Did you always know you were going to get into, the healthcare industry, so to speak? And what were the pivotal moments in your childhood or throughout your life that you've experienced that inspired you to, like revolutionizing the way couples approach fertility treatment in or healthcare in general, basically? What is the story
Yeah.
of Gabriela Rosa?
It's a great question. And I almost find that although, I love stories and, telling mine almost feels like it's given the stories that I hear in my clinic all the time from my patients, the challenges that they go through, it almost feels indulgent.
Yeah.
But I do understand that it's nice to kind of get a sense of the person. The way that this started, I never really planned to do any of the things that I'm doing now. Certainly not in the way that I'm doing it. And in fact, when I started practicing in 2001,
Mhm.
I really started in the kind of conventional, very status quo type of way. I
Mhm.
basically went and rented a room in a clinic, and then I actually got invited to work in a holistic medical center and
Mhm.
was there for several years. And then after a while, went to work in a fertility clinic that
Mhm.
was
Mhm.
it was a natural fertility clinic focused on natural treatment for people who wanted to overcome infertility and miscarriage. And when I say that I didn't really plan this,
Mhm.
I really was, after I finished my studies, or in fact, as I was completing my studies, I already knew that I wanted to specialize in something. Mastery for me is something that, I value a lot. And I wanted to be able to develop my capabilities to a point where, we really could do something extraordinary in the world. And so I was thinking of doing pediatrics. And my boss at the
Mm.
time, who was an obstetrician gynecologist, says to me, Gabriela, that's the worst idea you've ever had. And I'm
Oh.
like, oh, what?
Why? How
It's like, tell
come?
me what you really think.
Mhm.
But he basically said that because he pointed out that, like when you're working with babies, your patient is not really your patient and your patient can't speak.
Mm.
And, I found that interesting and true to a certain extent. And I thought, maybe it will be easier to do something that is more in alignment with the ethos of what I want to do, which was to really help, people take charge of their situations and their health. But in a way that it was easier to communicate. And so I was going to clinic hours for finishing off my degree, and I came across this little pamphlet that said,
Okay.
natural fertility clinic, and it was actually the clinic that I ended up working in many years afterwards.
Oh,
And that
interesting.
was the thing that made me think, I love babies, and that's a way to be connected with that kind of energy
Okay.
of creation and potential and
Mhm,
possibility.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
without being in a situation where I can't really understand what my patients say. What's fascinating about that, though, and like this is just a reflection based on many, many years, like what this is my 23rd, 24th year of doing this work. And the reflection that I have around this ability to communicate and to speak, and to be understood,
yes, of course.
especially for patients who struggle with infertility, it really is quite problematic, when we look at
Mhm,
it from a healthcare system
of
perspective.
course.
So I
Mhm,
find it interesting how, there's almost kind of like a 360 to that
mhm,
place where
mhm,
we go, are patients really getting the support and the quality of care that they need in a
mhm,
systematic kind of way across the world? And the answer really is no.
mhm,
It's but
mhm.
that's what sparked the impetus and the passion for what it is that I do today.
And that's quite interesting as well. Like you said, we're not when it comes to how the support that couples and like the individual or mothers to be, or the support that they get, it's not quite there, so to speak. And uh, first of all, it's quite interesting, the methodology and the success that came with this methodology, because it is renowned. Your methodology, of course, is renowned for effectiveness in addressing biochemical obstacles in fertility. But you do this all online and virtually, so to speak. Can you walk us through
Yeah.
some, first of all, some key principles and strategies that have led you to this remarkable success? And how did you achieve this all virtually? Is quite interesting.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a great question. I In 2022 we did a study of our patient results and our
Mhm.
program, the Fertility Breakthrough Program. That was my practicum project for my master's in public health at Harvard.
Right,
And
right.
the thing that I wanted to know is, how effective is this program? How effective are we at being able to deliver the outcome that we say we deliver? And of course,
Mhm,
in
mhm.
clinical practice, I used to see quite a lot of success, patients who
Yes.
had been infertile for years, like
Mhm,
5, 10, 19 years,
mhm,
be able to
mhm.
conceive naturally despite multiple failed IVF cycles. And I started to become really curious about, like, okay, what differentiates? What is the distinction here? Why is it that
Yes.
even though people are infertile, they go into treatment that's supposed to be quote unquote the gold standard, and
Yes,
they
of course.
fail through that gold standard, and then they come to us and they have a baby? Like, why? Right? So
Exactly.
that was, yeah, that was really, really a question that I wanted to dive into deeper. And
Please.
one of the things that we found in that process was that in terms of results,
Mhm,
78.8% of the patients who underwent the fertility breakthrough program, and this was a cohort of 544 patients, 78.8% took home healthy babies. And almost 50% of those had experienced previously failed IVF cycles, and
mhm,
over 50%, yeah, over 50% had experienced miscarriages. So, in that kind of situation where
mhm,
people on average had been
mhm,
infertile for almost 4 years,
mhm,
plus
mhm,
or minus almost 3 years, we knew
mhm.
that, okay, if this is working to this degree in this kind of severely challenged situation,
Yes,
and
yes.
patient population, then we
Mhm,
know that there is definitely something here that is worth bringing to the world at a larger kind of in a grander scale. And that's what led me to do my Doctor of Public Health at Harvard, because I
Wow.
decided that, it was important to really look at, okay, how can we bring this to more people, and bring this information and this form of treatment, to a larger number of people around the world. What ended up happening with that, and a lot of the things that I noticed in that process in terms of our methodology, is that really we're looking at the root cause of the problem.
Okay.
There is a huge systematic failure of the healthcare system.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
truly believe that doctors do the very best that they can with the
Mhm.
limited resources that they have. And,
Mhm.
in many countries around the world and many healthcare systems around the world, those resources, even though they are large in comparison, and if we put it into perspective,
Mhm.
that there's a large, amount of resources that are poured into these healthcare systems. But unfortunately, they are so focused at managing disease
Right.
rather than optimizing health and
There you go.
optimizing fertility,
That's it.
that we end up with a situation where, in cost effectiveness research, and this is the type of foundation research that goes into deciding what types of programs and kind of initiatives are funded through
Mhm.
healthcare systems.
Mhm.
Typically, the decision is we should not fund things that, essentially, if it's going to cost the same amount of money
Mhm.
to treat a disease
Mhm.
as it will to prevent the disease, let's not worry about prevention. Let's just worry about treatment.
Precisely.
Okay.
Precisely. Mhm.
So that is a fundamental flaw in the healthcare system. The
Precisely.
other aspect to this, and what
Yes.
perpetuates that, is, essentially there's a lot of benefit when you get a blockbuster drug that gets out into the market, Ozempic being one of the ones that we've seen recently. It's like there's a line, to the chemist for months for access to such a drug, given that healthy lifestyle, diet, and exercise can have the same effect as the drug will still be sold, outsold,
Oh my
than
goodness.
the healthcare, the kind of, health prescription.
Of
So
course.
that has a lot to kind of say for the mindset of the population as well.
Mhm.
But the way in which these things are funded and subsidized ends up
Mhm.
kind of promoting disease more than it promotes well-being and health, right? So
Absolutely.
that's where we have that kind of dichotomy. Now, in terms of how we do what it is that we do, like I said before, it's about understanding what is the root cause of this problem. Because in the healthcare system, typically, there's really only three major things that need to be ruled out before a doctor says we've done all the tests and nothing has worked. One
Okay.
is, does the woman have a uterus and fallopian tubes? Is she ovulating? And do we have sperm?
Okay.
Right?
Mhm.
And those three things are not everything that goes wrong with
Of course.
infertility and miscarriage, right?
Right.
But
Exactly.
those are the three things that, essentially, once doctors have said, yep, we've done all of those tests, everything is normal, keep trying,
No way.
the patient basically gets that message, right?
Wow.
And irrespective of what else might be going wrong, there is very little that gets kind of like dug deep into to figure out, okay, what is actually happening in this situation. Okay. So that's what we do. We start afresh from the beginning,
Okay.
and we literally dig deep into what is the cause of what's going on here.
It's quite astounding to me. I find that quite mind blowing because, of course, I've known a few friends of mine or friends of friends, and you people who just have problems. They just struggle with infertility, and these are really good people. And I couldn't think of better people who deserve to be parents. And but I always hear these instances where they struggle. They go through IVF, and they still. It's supposed to be. Supposedly, it's one of the most effective methods, right? But I keep being told that it's not that effective. Like half the time, it fails. But now you're
No,
telling.
actually, I have to stop you there, Joshua.
Please, please.
70% of the time it fails, not half
Oh,
of the time. 70% of the time. So
Oh, that's
the success
interesting.
rate for IVF, yeah, the success rate for IVF is around 30%. So,
Oh
and
my
that
goodness.
is for taking home a baby. Okay.
Okay.
So
Mhm.
basically, it is a therapy that fails most of the time, and it still gets being funded and subsidized by governments around the world because there's no research that goes into alternatives for that therapy for various reasons. I mean, drugs for IVF alone are in the thousands of dollars.
Of
So
course.
pharmaceutical companies benefit, clinics are typically private
Of
that
course.
deliver this kind of service, they benefit. All the research dollars that are poured
Of course.
into this kind of situation is, going towards these kinds of therapies. So
Mhm.
hence, we end up with a very lopsided, not particularly effective, not ideal situation, especially for couples who have very many different types of problems that tie into the outcome of not being able to deliver a pregnancy to term.
Right.
There are often thousands of things that can be getting in the way. When we talk about biochemistry, I mean, look at the many biochemical pathways that are in the body alone. When we
Of
talk
course.
about inability to conceive, inability to keep a pregnancy to term, these are outcomes.
Of course.
They're outcomes of multiple biochemical chain reactions that start all the way over here. And the part in the middle, right, is the part where you can actually intervene to get a different outcome, but it just doesn't happen. And so we just keep getting the same outcome. And when
There you go.
doctors say, we've done all the tests and everything is normal, just keep trying, or you've done a cycle, it didn't work, just keep trying, without digging deep into what's happening, we perpetuate more of the same ineffective result in the long
Th-
term.
that is great. Wow, that's a great way to put it. And it kind of answers my next question, but at the same time, it's like you mentioned, to me the astounding part is that we're really only trying to look at these three things that you mentioned, like literally that's what's wrong. Okay, we've done everything, we're good. But it makes sense that there's this, the biochemical aspect to it, just like a biohacking aspect to it, so to speak. Like you have to look at everything as a whole, like what's your lifestyle, what food do you eat, what do you know, what kind of, what are the factors that contribute to your biology in general, before we really start getting into those parts of how fertile or infertile you are, and how can we approach a more effective treatment to that. M- my question more is more of a tangent, and something I'm curious more about. You mentioned that IVF fails more than 70% of the time. Would you say, again, it's because it's lopsided, these are what they push most of the time, even though the success rate is so low? Is it mostly because of the methodology itself that is ineffective? But again, does it really go back to the biology in general of why IVF has such a low success rate?
You asked a really great question in the beginning. Can you click a button and get pregnant? Like, are you a click away from
Hmm.
getting
Hmm.
pregnant? And the truth is no.
Of course not. Of course not.
because because a lot of people think that that's why people go to IVF, because they
Exactly.
think that they're just going to do this easy thing
Hmm.
that is going to take a month, and they're going to be
Hmm.
able to get pregnant and have their healthy baby if they've been struggling. But what we see and what the data demonstrates and what the science demonstrates is that it doesn't quite happen that way. When it comes to why IVF is not as effective as it could be, typically the answer is because it's not actually all encompassing of the reasons why people are infertile. IVF was first originally developed to help women who didn't have fallopian tubes, or who had blocked fallopian tubes or damaged fallopian tubes,
Whoa.
to be able to bypass the need for fallopian tubes. Okay.
Okay.
So that's why IVF even happened. It was like,
Exists.
let's figure out a way to be able to do this. However, today, even though the therapy was tested and proven and useful for
Hmm.
that particular demographic of women who didn't, have various other issues necessarily, their major issue was just, fallopian tubes being damaged. It's now being used for every possible reason for infertility and even miscarriage. Now, reason with me. if you are getting pregnant, right, and only about, let's say, let's give it a percentage. Let's say 30% of the reason as to why people who go through IVF don't have a baby is because of genetic factors. And let's just, that's not exactly the case, but let's just reason it's an overestimation. The reality of it is this. The women today who are going through IVF are very different to the women who went through IVF in 1978 when IVF actually originated. The women who were going through IVF then were much younger. They didn't have as many different exposures as we have today in terms of chemicals and radiation and, all sorts of other different types of situations.
Microplastics.
And, oh my God, microplastics huge. And so, all of these different aspects that prevail today and reasons as to why people need to go, quote unquote, need to go through IVF are very different to how they were in the 80s, right? And so basically, and the reasons as to why people end up engaging in going down the IVF path is also complicated by a whole lot of other health conditions that aren't being addressed when we're using a therapy that was, practiced for one purpose to many different types of situations. We then need to start questioning, but hang on a second, what else is going on here that is stopping us from being able to conceive naturally, especially for the women who have normal fallopian tubes?
Yes, of course.
Especially for the couples who basically, end up with embryos. Because by the time, if IVF was to be the be all and end all, and I'm not saying that it's not effective or useful, it's not effective, but it's useful. And so basically, there are people who will need IVF no matter what because of several reasons. And in those situations where they address all of the different, aspects that are getting in the way, if they still need IVF, fantastic. In my clinic, we still use IVF. We still refer to IVF where it's necessary. It's the overuse of the technique without without the addressing of the issues that are getting in the way. Let me give you an example.
Please.
For women who essentially have thyroid dysfunction, hypothyroidism, where the TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, is elevated. It means that the functional side of that equation is not working. The T3, T4, T3 that needs to be converted into, T4 that needs to be converted into T3, which is the active form of the hormone for the thyroid, that conversion is not effectively happening. What happens is that TSH increases. Okay, so the thyroid stimulating hormone levels increase because the body's trying to go, okay, you're not having enough, and it's not that you're not having enough, is that it's not converting effectively. And so it shows up as if you're not having enough. Now, we know that a TSH level of 2.3 IUL and above actually increases the risk of miscarriage. Okay? But the range of the population of quote unquote normal TSH is up to 5. So what does that mean? What does that mean? When you know that 2.3 and above causes miscarriage and 5 is considered normal. You end up with a whole lot of people who basically have, for fertility, abnormal TSH, who are being told everything is normal, just keep trying. But that is a direct reason as to why they're having miscarriages. Explain that to me.
Oh, no.
And then, instead of addressing the TSH levels or the reason as to why the thyroid isn't working effectively, they're just told, go and do IVF. Now, they go and do IVF, they have an embryo, the embryo implants, but then it doesn't progress to a positive pregnancy, eventually in a baby. Why? Because the TSH is still at over 2.3. So you're still going to have an increased risk of miscarriage, even if you go and do IVF. So can you see what I'm saying? Like this, and like that, there are so many other factors that can get in the way that causes the same kind of situation from happening over and over again for many couples who spend literally thousands of dollars, because IVF is not cheap. In the US, an average IVF cycle is $17,000. and it ranges anywhere between
Oh
twelve
my
to thirty
goodness.
thousand dollars per cycle.
My
And the
goodness.
latest data shows that in order to have close to an 80% success rate through IVF, you need, on average, 8 cycles. 8. Imagine 8 times the average amount that
Wow.
an IVF
Come
cycle
on.
costs, $17,000.
My
It's a lot of
goodness.
money. It's a house.
Wow.
So
It's
forget the college fund.
oh my goodness. And it's not even like it's a house. Forget the college fund. Try to have a kid, but it may or may not work. But at least we tried. 8 cycles. I mean, Gabriella, this is all aus- astounding and mind
It's a
blowing to
bit mind
me.
boggling, isn't
It
it?
is. It's
Yes,
mind
I
boggling
know.
because first of all, you're telling me that there doctors know this, of course, right? It's
This
quite
is common knowledge in the science.
exactly,
Absolutely.
and but still
This is not a
pushing that.
secret.
I was gonna say, and still pushing that treatment is to me is we can we can go deep on like the big pharma and like and all the treatment and all the funding. We can go deep into that. These are topics that are largely talked about, and I'm glad that we are talking about more. And of course, voices like you who are thought leaders in this, like teaching that the importance of biochemical or biology first before having this kind of end all be all treatment approach. But this wouldn't be the first myth that you encountered in this, right? You have an extensive experience. What are other common misconceptions or myth about fertility that you have encountered, and one that you have to dispel through your education and through your programs? And how do you battle this daily misconceptions? Because I understand it must be a lot, and it needs to be talked
Yeah.
about more.
Yeah, look, it's really difficult because there is almost an indoctrination of the general public
Mm,
as to
mm, mhm,
a line of therapy. Like if you
mhm,
think
mhm.
about it, when you go like any couple who's struggling to conceive, they go to their GP. They may or may not be asked deeper questions about what's happening for them. Like, do you
Yes,
drink? Do you smoke? Like basic things that we
yes.
know negatively impact fertility.
Mhm,
And,
mhm.
but they are certainly almost always given a referral to go and talk to an IVF doctor. So you can see
Yes,
that that's a systemic way in
it
which
is.
that process works. And because of it, because doctors are held in such high regard, and there is an entire kind of infrastructure around how healthcare is delivered across the world. Patients are very unsure of going against their doctor's advice,
Of
right?
course.
Because it's like, well, hang on a second, my doctor said that I should do this, then I should do
Mm,
this. It's like
exactly. Yes.
that's essentially how typically it will work. And it's
Hmm.
not until people question deeply and try and really assess what else are some reasons as to why
Yes.
this is the information that I'm being delivered,
Hmm.
they kind of stay in the same place. Myths are right. The information ecosystem these days is so complicated, and it's really difficult for people to be able to discern what is true and what's not true.
Yes.
And, I think that one of the big things that I say to patients is this, because what happens often is this conversation that we started with, everything is normal, just keep trying. The reality is that if a couple has been trying for more than 6 months and they're still not, pregnant, and if in 2 years they're not holding the healthy baby of their dreams in their arms, whatever it is that they're being told about everything being normal, just keep trying, is not true.
Yes.
Because if that was true, a pregnancy takes 9 months.
Mm,
They would already be holding their baby,
precisely.
right? But from the time that you have a test done, sure, give it 6 months, and if you're still not pregnant, 9 months after that, you would be delivering a baby if everything was actually normal.
Exactly.
So that's really where I think, like one of the biggest myths that people get told and that they have to disentangle is this idea of, what is normal, first of all. And just because one area of the fertility equation might not have major abnormalities, is it optimal?
Yes.
Because if it's not optimal, like the example that I gave in terms of thyroid, if it's not optimal, we have to question, could this be causing an issue in this
Yeah.
particular situation?
Exactly.
And not just
Exactly.
leave it as, on face value that, oh yeah, everything is normal. I should just keep trying.
Mm.
Because that creates a lot of, extra burden on people who are struggling to have a baby. There's usually a reason. There's usually multiple reasons. It's usually not
Multiple
even just
reasons.
one. It's multiple reasons. So, the misinformation question is such
Yes.
a huge question, and it gets perpetuated online a lot as well,
A lot.
because sometimes, especially, one of the big things that we see online, and this is part of my doctoral studies, is that most of the information that you will find on Instagram, for example, is actually produced by patients or people who call themselves quote unquote health coaches and have done an IVF cycle. And so therefore they consider themselves as experts on the topic. And they will produce information that sure may have worked for them, but is not the solution for everyone else. And then people actually start to work and operate from limited information or oversimplified information that is not exactly correct in their particular
Right.
situation.
Right.
So that also extra overly complicates, what people have
Layers. Yeah.
access to and creates
Mhm.
more confusion.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So, it's a
It's
big,
la-
it's a
yes.
big story.
It's an uphill battle. It's layers upon layers of misconceptions and layers upon layers of misinformation. And it's something to, I mean, it's a personal battle. It's a career battle. It's a professional battle every day for you. It's industry wide. But it needs to be talked about. One of the many misconceptions that we
Yeah.
face here as well is, of course, um, you're drinking too much beer, you're drinking too much alcohol. That's why you have low sperm count, and for the women, it's like there's a lot of perpetuated, at least in our culture, from where I am, it's like a lot of perpetuated, like um, you need to eat more of this, or you need to eat like a certain type of food, but I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of it also is the stresses that we're facing every day. Is the amount of stress that we deal with. That's why I feel like infertility is at such a high rate. What are the common ones that you see that are common obstacles when it comes to infertility, and how have you addressed this with the clients and the patients that you've had?
Yeah. That idea, stresses play a role, and I would consider them as exposures, right? So there's
Mm,
physical, biochemical, and emotional stress.
yes.
And all of those types of stress will have an impact on the system, the body, and
Yes.
the ability of taking a healthy pregnancy to term. When I'm asked, by patients or by people who understand, what can I do to help myself? I always talk about this in this way, which is act pregnant now to get pregnant later. That's what both partners need to be doing if they are to
Interesting.
overcome, yeah, if they are to overcome infertility and miscarriage. So if you think about it, inside you right now, let's say, one day you decide that you want to have a baby with your partner, you will
Hmm.
say, well, okay, right now within you, there is 50% of that little baby that you want to create. And
Okay.
in your partner, there is the other 50%.
Right.
So those are the cells that are essentially going to yield the outcome that you want, which is a healthy baby.
Right.
So the key aspect, way before you decide to start even trying, is actually taking care of that 50% of that little baby that you want to create
Yes, of course.
now.
Yes, of course.
Because by doing so, you are protecting your chances and you are optimizing your chances of
Yes.
being able to take home a healthy baby.
Hmm.
So, all
Hmm.
of the things that you would absolutely start doing or stop doing if you
Hmm.
were pregnant right now
Right
are the
now.
things that you start doing or stop doing if you want to
So
be pregnant one day.
wow, wow, wow. That is quite.
You know?
That's just quite the astounding. I love it. I love the concept, of course, because it's not it, you have to act in a way as if how are you taking care of your health now, because if you see it from that perspective it really comes down to that, right? If you're not acting like the same way you would be pregnant right now, then there's really no reason for you to be, there's no reason for you to be fertile. It's going to be difficult, right? I love
Yeah.
that concept. I love that aspect because people more often people think like, I'm so busy and I don't have time for all of this. When I do get pregnant though, I'll stop all of this and I'll get, come to a much more how you say this, a much more balanced life, a much more, there's no reason, there's not an excuse. The excuse is that the thing now is to start now, and then you come into
Yeah.
that practice, come into that habit. I love that. I love that perspective.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that you've shared with us today. There is a lot to really dig into this, but I love that you are a leading voice into this industry, a leading voice into this practice, into the misconceptions. Again, it's an uphill battle for you, but it's quite noble in what you do because there are a lot of good parents out there who deserves to be parents and just don't know where to go. Um, Talk to us a little bit about your own personal challenges, or rather stories of other people this time, that stand out to you and how you've influenced their approach to fertility treatment and ultimately shaping, their lives and transforming their lives. Any success stories that stands out to you, and one I feel that would, inspire others as well to, to approach this differently.
Yeah, we actually, I started a baby gallery some years back because I was like, gosh,
Wow.
we have so many inspiring
Oh.
stories and it's on Instagram. It's instagram.com/ Gabriela Rosa Fertility, and it's Gabriela
Hmm.
with one L. Um, and in there we put, lots of our inspiring baby stories. And I
Hmm.
posted one this morning actually
Hmm.
of this lady who had been trying to get pregnant for 8 years and had done so many different things. Without success, many failed IVF cycles, and we found that there was at least 8 different reasons. Like from adenomyosis to endometriosis to poor sperm count to alloimmunity and autoimmunity, and you name it, lots of different complicated and complex
Right.
situations that, caused them to be where they were. And, by disentangling all of these pieces and all of these different aspects, we were able to finally get her beautiful little baby boy.
Wow.
And it's incredibly rewarding when that
Wow.
happens. We now have lots of medical doctors that come to us as patients because they realize that medicine, can only help them or take them so far. And that also is incredibly rewarding, to be recognized in that way, where we literally have, lots of different kinds of specialties of medical doctors referring to us, coming to us as patients. We've had many amongst our success stories. And, it's one of those things that every baby is so different, and every baby that we help bring into the world, the parents require such different things for
Wow.
that to happen, especially when challenges have been, at the forefront of their experience. But I often say that these days, with enough effort, energy, time, money, it's possible to overcome all of these challenges and create the healthy baby of their dreams. And for me, it's just such a beautiful, like it's a privilege to be able to be a part of those stories.
Lovely. I mean, this must be a lot. There's a lot there because, I mean, I feel like it's even much more meaningful now because it feels as if, like again, like infertility rates are skyrocketing, and having that success and finding that kind of beacon of hope for the individuals and the mothers and the couples searching for this, gift. I feel like is such a lovely, noble thing to do that you're doing. Um, I mean, of course, I invite, of course, our audience and listeners to visit that baby gallery. You shared that Instagram with us just now, Gabriela Rosa with a single L, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure to of Gabriela Rosa Fertility. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's it.
Fantastic. Where else can we find you? Of course, we're connected on LinkedIn, I believe, or just sent you one. But where else can we learn about what you do, Gabriela, and
People, yeah,
get
absolutely.
educated?
So people can go to, I mean, actually, my book, Fertility Breakthrough: Overcoming
Mhm.
Infertility and Recurrent
Please,
Miscarriage When
please.
Other Treatments Have Failed, is available free on Spotify. So people
Wow.
can just search that,
Mhm,
Fertility
mhm,
Breakthrough by Gabriela Rosa. And people can go to the website as well, which is fertilitybreakthrough.com.
mhm,
And another way, for people is essentially they can Google my name and just put Gabriela Rosa Fertility on Google and they will find it. And it's GabrielaRosa.
Fantastic. And again, to all our audience and listeners out there, make sure to grab the opportunity, learn more about this. If you know any friends or family going through the same struggles, infertility struggles, I hope you're inspired by this episode. I certainly am. I would know, who to tell this to. I would know who the person it is, to learn from, and that would be Gabriela today. Gabriela, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing all of these insight and perspective, and I think it's quite valuable for a lot of people out there.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Joshua. It's been a pleasure.
I loved it. I love you being on here. To all our audience and listeners as well, I hope you enjoyed this as much as we did, and see you on the next one.
All right, so here's the thing, we try to get a little bit better every day, but we can't do it without you. So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the space under.